Speaking of shady countries, guess who's just given a clean chit to Pakistan's elections? The United States. We knew Washington would back the Pakistan army, but to this extent, maybe not. Let me recount how Pakistan held its general election. Mobile internet turned off. Most popular leader in jail facing 200 cases. Biggest opposition party stripped of its election symbol, and vote counting took almost 2 days. How would you describe this election? You would say it's not an election. If it happened anywhere else, the US would also say the same thing. But this was Pakistan, so Washington gave a clean chit. They said the elections were clearly competitive, and they said so twice. Listen to this.
We congratulate the Pakistani people, first of all, for participating on the election on Thursday. It was clearly a competitive election in which people were able to exercise their choice. It's clear that the elections in Pakistan were competitive, and we look forward to working with the government once it's formed that the people of Pakistan elected.
Not sure what competitive means in the US. Does it mean stuffing ballots? Or shutting down the internet, or deploying soldiers inside counting centers? If so, yes, it was competitive. But let's be serious for a minute. We saw how the early trends melted away in Pakistan, how multiple opposition parties complained of rigging. Did the US not see any of that? Well, Washington did talk about the fraud claims. They say, let Pakistan investigate them. How about that? The Pakistani deep state rigs an election, so the US wants the same deep state to investigate it. Try making sense of that. And for the record, Islamabad has no plans to investigate. They say elections are an internal matter. All these statements expose America's policy on Pakistan. They can't seem to abandon the Pakistani army despite the rigging, despite the support for the Taliban, despite the double game on terror. The US remains in the army's corner. And no, it's not the same across the Western world. For example, look at Europe. This is how the EU reacted to Pakistan's elections. We regret the lack of a level playing field due to the inability of some political actors to contest the elections, restrictions to freedom of assembly, restrictions of access to the internet, as well as allegations of severe interference in the electoral process. For a change, Europe is right. This wasn't a level playing field. This was an election rigged by the Pakistani army, yet the US calls it competitive. Compare this to their response to Bangladesh's election. Washington had a lot more to say then. There was no internet shutdown in Bangladesh, no reports of widespread rigging, no army to pull the strings, but listen to the US statement for the Bangladesh election. We share the view with other observers that these elections were not free or fair, and we regret that not all parties participated. So Bangladesh's elections were not free or fair, but Pakistan's elections are competitive. It's not a first for the US. Joe Biden has hosted 2 democracy summits so far. Both times, Bangladesh was not invited. But guess who was? Pakistan. And both times, Pakistan skipped. Maybe even the generals couldn't buy into the farce. My point is, Washington stands exposed yet again. It's no secret that they support the generals in Rawalpindi to keep their dirty works department in the region up and running. It's also no secret that Nawaz Sharif is pro-US, quite different from Imran Khan.
अपने मुल्क को खुद आज इस नुक्ते पे हम लेके आए हैं, किसी और का कसूर नहीं है। ये हिंदुस्तान ने हमारे खिलाफ नहीं किया, ये को अमेरिका ने हमारे खिलाफ नहीं किया, ये को अफगानिस्तान ने हमारे खिलाफ नहीं किया, ये हमने खुद किया, अपने पाँव पे खुद कुल्हाड़ा मारा है हमने।
The only reason we suffered so much was because we became an ally of the US, of the coalition in the war against Afghanistan, where there were attacks being conducted from Afghan soil into Pakistan.
So the US likes this present coalition, not Bhutto plus Sharifs, but Sharifs plus the army. That's what the Americans want. Hence, they're all silent on the rigging. But imagine if this happened elsewhere. The criticism would have been never ending. So the next time America begins a moral lecture, ask them about Pakistan. They will either stop the lecture or talk about how competitive it was.
From impeachments to inaugurations, if it's a political story, we are on the scene. The race for the White House is heating up.
We're beating Biden.
How dare he say that?
If it's breaking news, we're live with the latest coverage. From the White House, the State Department, and Capitol Hill, we know the issues, but above all, we know the players to bring you the latest in-depth analysis on all the key stories that we're covering. I'm Eric Ham. Join me from Washington here on First Post America.